Hey everyone, JP here from the Biz Dojo. Just want to let you know about Newsly. It's an audio app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about some of the most trending topics, and then it reads them to you in a natural human voice. Much like this beautiful voice right here. Anyways, for the first time in the history of the internet, the web is listenable. You can browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. So stop scrolling, just start listening. And they have podcasts too, so you can listen to us there, as well as a whole bunch of other podcasts from over 40 countries. So check it out, download Newsly from newsly.me, or just click the link in the description for the podcast and use promo code B1Z2021. That'll get you a month free premium description. Nothing like it. Check it out, newsly.me.
This episode is powered by Airdrie DQ Grill and Chill, owned and operated by local entrepreneurs. Check out one of their 3 Airdrie locations today and pick up a blizzard, ice cream cake, or dilly bar. The Biz Dojo is also brought to you by Beyond a Beaten Path. If you're on the lookout for a personalized gift, head to beyondabeatenpath.ca and get started on your custom creation. Beyond a Beaten Path. Personalize it, because everything else is boring.
So, a couple weeks ago, Declan, just playing around, we were running around, and then we stop. No more playing like that. No more roughhousing. No more. He's standing at the back door, just standing there, sees something he wants, takes one step, goes down, chips a tooth, like a really bad chip.
That happened to Lyndon when he was about that age. It was a bathtub incident, but that's a significant trauma for a young lad.
Well, and it happened to my sister too. That's weird. And there's so much chip toothing around me. Chip toothing, whatever.
Either way. Either way.
So we go. He's missing like half his tooth. Like it was not like a little corner piece or anything. Like he took a chunk, and we get referred, and we had to remove the tooth. In the conversation that we had, I found that I really wasn't listening to my wife about what we need to do with the tooth removal, because there's some choices that we have to make as far as like drugs and those sorts of things. Just he's got to be a little bit looped for it, or he's going to remember it, all those sorts of things. And I had in my head, I had already made my decision about what was good and what wasn't. And my wife, being a science teacher, has her own thoughts and opinions, but I found that I wasn't really listening. And so we ended the conversation, naturally ended the conversation. I walked away and I reflected on it, and I realized I was not giving that the attention that I needed to give it. I wasn't really hearing what my wife was saying. I just had made my assumptions and off I went. So I opened the conversation again. We had a really good chat, and it actually changed my opinion on what we need to do for his tooth and the drug induction and papoose cocoon that they put babies in when they're doing this sort of thing, which is really weird and could probably be a whole episode on its own if we explored that. But
we've had a lot of dental stuff over the years, so we could have a whole episode on it.
But it just made me realize, like, I often practice the things we talk about when it comes to listening and leaving space, and the importance of like dead air. For a podcast, not so great, but for a conversation, especially those sorts of conversations, really important. And as much as I practice it regularly, in that moment, I found that I didn't. And going back and having the conversation, just like, it really meant so much. It helped us get to what we wanted to do. It really opened the door, and it was a moment of clarity for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great story, and I think resonates with me on multiple fronts.
Not just the tooth front.
Not just the tooth front. I do think there's a connection to how we show up, and then in terms of presence, like are you fully present, and what does that even mean, right? Because that can easily become one of those buzzwords, like, oh, be present all the time, and that's an exceedingly difficult thing to do in today's world, right? Multitasking, thinking about something else, your phone buzzes.
You've got a phone.
Yeah,
that literally is intended to interrupt whatever you're doing during the day with buzzing. And
exactly. So, having totally uninterrupted conversation with somebody has become this like unicorn almost. That's how we show up, I guess, for the podcast every time. Like there's no interruptions. There's no looking at your phone. There's no like we have this, I'm going to say it's like an unspoken team norms as it were. And, when we're recording, when we're planning, when we're all in, like we're fully present and we're doing it. And I think, when you think about this episode that we're introing right now with Erin, we talked a lot about communication, both the verbal side, which obviously everyone's familiar with, but also some of the nonverbal cues or some of the things that come up that we project that we don't even realize that maybe that we're projecting or that we're putting out in the world based on previous habits, whatever. And I think, what your story reminds me of is just when you're in those situations where there's a lot going on, a trauma or an injury or something that's happened to your child, you can kind of jump to sort of fight or flight, and you're like already make up your mind, and to ground yourself and breathe and be open to new information and have that two-way dialogue with your wife, the doctor, etc., can be a really difficult thing to actually do in the moment.
What's crazy is his appointment's not for like a month. Like the doctor is clearly not concerned about it short term. Like it's going to be fine. He's had it for a couple of weeks at this point. So why was my brain so quick to make a decision that's like, hey, this has got, in the next 5 minutes, we have to have a decision. The world's going to explode if you don't have your mind made up. Like it's crazy how quickly we make up our mind about things that in the moment the decision doesn't need to be made right now.
Yeah, and what goes into that decision-making process. And it reminds me of this concept. It's not really a concept, I guess, but the reaction versus response. Because an event like that will trigger a reaction, and that'll be, based on your experiences, your biases, your, all that stuff kind of, you will automatically come up with a reaction. But then how do you take a step back, take a breath, before you come up with your response? Because if your reaction informs your response, I think you end up in the position that you were just talking about, versus sort of taking a step back, getting as much information as you can. And to your point, like you got 5 weeks to come up with that. Why are you so quick to just boom, I need to make a decision right now?
Well, and look, like I think our listeners know this. I spend a lot of time thinking on, writing about, discovering bias, the psychology behind the decisions we make, the psychology of leadership. Like that's totally my jam. And yet there I was in the moment, impacted by all of those things that I constantly try to overcome and help others overcome. And it was just, it all came together for me, like, 10 minutes later, after I had made that decision that needed to be made in the next 5 minutes. 10 minutes later, I really sat back and thought about it. And it's crazy how quickly our mind makes decisions and how hard it is for us to overcome those decisions and to just sit back and listen to others and let that decision be changed for, often for the better. But the information from others that we receive in those moments of just listening can really help you make a better decision for yourself or, in this case, for others.
Yeah. So I think, again, if you're willing, maybe take a moment and reflect on the last time you changed your mind. What information did you receive, or what mind state were you in that you were willing to receive new information and actually change your mind? Welcome to the Biz Dojo. This week we're joined by Erin Evans. Erin, welcome to the dojo.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're super excited to have you. For folks at home, Erin, you run a yoga practice out of Banff. You're also a podcaster, a mom, all kinds of amazing things that you're up to. But just curious, how would you introduce yourself? What are the top of mind things that you would share with our listeners?
Okay, I would say I am 50% yogi. I'd say I'm a 20% prairie girl. I'd say I'm 20% dirty rap music. And I would say I'm a 10% coach for folks that want to get after life and go bigger. I don't know if that adds up to 100, but
Close enough. I was not expecting the dirty rap music, but that resonates with me. That's very much at least 10% of my life as well.
Yeah, this interview may go a totally different direction now that Seth has that knowledge.
So, I know that you've been in the podcast game, I think pretty much the same amount of time that we've been in it. What inspired you to go down that road as, one of the platforms or avenues for you to, share your yogi journey, your coaching? Just curious what got you into that. And for folks at home, that's actually how I came across you, as you were a guest on a fellow Calgary podcast, the Second Act podcast, and then sort of stumbled on your podcast. And I was really inspired by some of your stuff. So just kind of starting out there, what inspired you to start podcasting?
So I think I am a deep thinker. I love to pontificate on what's happening in the world and where people are at with their mental health, where they feel stuck, what inspires them. And I run yoga teacher training, so I speak a lot for a living, and I love to speak. And I'm motivated to create a ripple of change in the world through casting spells with our words. I find there are so many people near to me that are really inspiring. And yeah, I wanted the world to see what was happening in my community.
What have you learned about yourself on that leg of your journey? Because, like you said, you're a coach, you're a yogi, you're used to speaking a whole lot. When you throw a mic up in front of yourself for that first few times and you have to start kind of delivering that content or putting that content out in the world. I know for me and JP, it sounded a lot easier than maybe it was. What have you learned about yourself as you've kind of dove into that whole space? That
my impulsivity might be my greatest gift, because I wasn't concerned about perfectionism, whereas a lot of my guests would come on and say, could you edit that out and change that? And could we shoot it again? And it's not about perfectionism. It's about action. And I look back on some of the podcasts I did and they're kind of embarrassing, but it's still me. And that was me 6 months ago, a year ago.
It's funny how your quality standards change. Like you start out and you're just so excited to get podcasting, and then you get into season 3 and you really start thinking about those polished edges.
Absolutely. And to ask good questions that get people unguarded immediately. Because for a lot of my guests, they're talking about losing 100 pounds, losing the use of their legs. This is a really intimate, vulnerable thing. So I want them to feel safe with me immediately so we can go deep. And I've definitely missed the mark. And I maybe am getting better at creating a safe space for people to go deep quickly.
Do you find that now that you've been doing the podcast and you've had that level of communication with people, do you find that it's transferred into your yogi practice at all, where you're helping people open up there as well?
That's a really good question. I believe that it is allowing me to touch lives beyond a physical form. So I'm able to enter different realms of my community, but I don't know if it's impacted what I do on the mat or in the studio.
I think, the concept we're touching on there around creating safe spaces is really something that I'm going to say fascinated with or really been tapping into over the last little while. Is there any secret sauce that you've uncovered in terms of, the method or the tangible how you create those safe spaces, whether it be podcast, yogi studio, at home, whatever? Have you figured out from your perspective or what works for you in terms of creating those safe spaces?
Yes. Immediately, I leave my stuff at the door. Immediately, I leave my story, my agenda at the door. I allow this person to be the star of their show. And I immediately want them to know that I've got their back. And I've done that my entire life, whether it's a stranger at the grocery store or a new kid at school that just arrived. But it's like uncloaking my heart from feeling insecure or are they judging me, so that I can actually meet them heart to heart. I think it's through eye contact. I think it's through the way you use intonation in the voice. But I think it's just a genuine, deep love for the person in front of me.
Your recent podcast, you talked about communication. You hit on a few items there regarding communication. How much of that, I guess I'll say, coaching experience is that nonverbal communication from yourself, and then also helping the other person understand their own nonverbal communication?
Already, I can read both of you are tremendously organized. I can tell that you are beyond a level of look at me. It's not a fight for attention. I can tell by the way you're dressed. I can tell by the background in your space, how you hold your body. So I know already if you and I were doing a coaching thing, or you and I were communicating, we can talk about bigger things because you're above the nitty-gritty mess, distraction that most folks live in. So I pick it up on the way people speak, the clothing they wear, what their house looks like. And it's so much beyond what we say, because so often what we say is not what we mean. I mentioned that in the podcast about this social lubricant of me saying what I think Seth wants me to say. So I think it's just being like hyper aware of the nonverbal communication that happens all the time. Body language, eye movements.
I think a lot of, especially when you talk to leaders, and I'll say, entry level, mid-level leaders, they communicate messages. And they don't necessarily understand the importance of the sort of nonverbal cues that happen. Is there something that you do to help people see that they can read those cues, or help them be able to read them?
I'm big on filler words and verbal tics. So when I'm teaching people to be teachers, the so's, maybes, likes, I don't know, do you get it? Right? Those are the things I try to excavate when folks are learning how to speak. I'll often call them out on that. Space, silence, being okay to not know what to say immediately. I've already noticed I'll speak and both of you take a pause before you answer, so I can tell that you're with me. And through my coaching practice, one of the coolest things is you truly are just listening. You're not directing or leading a conversation. You're truly allowing the person in front of you to talk through whatever's happening in their lives. And I used to think as a coach or a teacher, I need to fix it or help or give advice. And that's actually not at all helpful.
One of the things that you've talked about in your podcast is, through your coaching, is helping people tap into their inner wisdom, which, I don't know that there's any other way to effectively coach someone. Ultimately, you could see anything you want in someone else. But if they don't see it for themselves, if they don't experience it, if they don't believe it, it's going to be pretty tough to have that manifest into anything tangible or real. On the note of communication, I think one thing I've noticed through my coaching and coaching of others is, I had this habit of saying, and I've noticed a lot of other people say this term of, does that make sense? It was in one coaching session that I was in with my coach, and I realized this need within me to seek sort of external validation. So sort of you end up you get into that safe space, you get vulnerable, you open up, and then it's like you say something and it's like, oh my God, this person might think I'm crazy. So now I need to get a little bit of external validation that they don't think I'm crazy and that it makes sense to them. The reason I tell this story, I guess, is, at some point I realized it doesn't actually matter if it makes sense to them. What matters is that it makes sense to me. And if it makes sense to you, then, you can kind of flip the conversation to be like, does that resonate with you? Is there something I'm missing? You can have a totally different conversation instead of seeking external validation. So, to me, that's just sort of an example of I don't know if it's a nonverbal cue, but a way that we communicate with our subconscious or bias that we don't even realize we're doing. And just wondering, is there anything that you experience with your clients or with yourself where you're like, I'm actually doing a thing that I didn't realize I was doing? And just sort of learn from that.
What I love about what you just said is you're paying a coach, and then you're saying, does that make sense? Do you like me? Do you love me? And yet we're paying for their services. Of course that makes sense. Of course they've got your back. Yeah, oftentimes people will be apologetic when they get into the weeds or when they're emotional. I had a client the other day say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, this is depressing." And I'm in for it. Let's move through this murky muck so that we can get you above it. So I know for myself too that urge to people please. I want my coach, my therapist, my doctor to like me, but why? And so that's been a huge turning point for me is, what do you want, Erin? What do you need out of this? Because Seth wants to support you. That's been probably the biggest thing I've picked up on. And the self-deprecating talk we use almost to undermine our excellence and our power.
You would never talk to someone the way you talk to yourself is what I've learned in every coaching session I've ever had, either for myself or with others, is our internal voice is the worst.
This morning I spilled water and I was like, "You an idiot." And I thought, what, just off topic, do you have a niche that you coach, the both of you?
Humans. That's
humans. That's a niche.
Yeah, we're really specific.
I actually proposed that topic because to my coach, because I do feel like I've coached in sports, I've coached executives and leaders, and I do feel like if I had a niche, it's probably with athletes up and coming around mindset in particular. And what my coach said to me, niches are for quiches. Apparently that's a quote from Steve Chandler, who's a pretty revered coach. And so that got me thinking, like, I don't know that I have a niche per se. I don't know if it's quite as broad as JP, but I think for me, the people I want to work with are really people who are up and coming leaders who want to lead. Maybe they don't realize that they have the skills or the abilities yet. And I want to help them find it and see it. So those are sort of my ideal clients, and they could be in sports, they could be in business, they could be in life. I'm open to anything, but it's really just people who want to go on that self-discovery journey, tap into that inner wisdom. I want to create the space for them and help them get there.
Yeah. I mean, in all seriousness, it's probably similar for me. And I think the one thing I would add, and Seth would probably add this too, as he starts thinking about it more and more right now. But people who not just up and coming, but people who are stuck because they can't unlock that part of their brain that lets them take those next steps. I think that's the experience that I've had personally is taking the time to really sit and understand yourself to unlock whatever's blocking you from taking that next step in leadership if you've already done a few things along the way.
One of the things that you mentioned, one of the many things you've mentioned in your podcast that resonated with me, Erin, was this concept of purpose over passion. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brain on that topic a little bit more, because, I think it was one of your most recent podcasts where you talked about that and just sort of how passion, can sort of ebb and flow. But if you have a purpose and like a core reason or belief for why you're doing something, that's more powerful. And just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that and share with our listeners, where that concept comes from.
Passion to me is hormonal. It is enthusiastic and energetic. It is fast paced. It's I want it now. It's this big vision of who I'm going to be. I think it can be pretty self-centered. And I think with all that being said, it's more of an adrenaline cortisol thing, whereas purpose is the long game. It is focused on the other. It's focused on changing the world through whatever. You work at a flower shop, a hospital. Purpose is about grace and poise, and it's not attached to the result. I think passion so often is, I'm doing this because I'll get X, be it fame, fortune, whatever. I think purpose is a life daily on point. The way we eat our breakfast, the way we communicate with our children, the way we make love, it's moment to moment. It's attached to the heart. And I think in a lot of the spiritual teachings, it's like you have a right to your action, but not your action's fruit. So never act for the fruit, act for the action alone. And that's where I'm I'm a real big proponent of mastery. It's not performance. That's kind of where it all comes from, is the difference between living for a performance or living for mastery. Is that performance is like, look at me, I've done so well. Mastery is like, I want to learn more. I want to be better for no other reason than to live better.
I've noticed, recently, I like to ask this question of people when I start working with them, whether it's formally or informally, who are you and what do you want? And I find people get really uncomfortable with that question. Like, I don't know, like, and then they start rambling, or they don't really know what to say. And then they flip it back on you to kind of say, well, what would you say? And I find it's a really interesting dynamic. And maybe the better question, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it, is, what is your purpose? And so I guess for the listeners and folks who maybe struggle with that question or have never really thought about how they would answer that question, how would you describe your purpose, Erin? Like, who are you and what do you want? Said a better way, what is your purpose in life?
I want people to fall in love with themselves. I want people to feel this like the star of their own life. I want people to feel confident, and I want them to know that I see them. And I think that is my gift. And I think that's always been what I'm naturally inclined to do. I want people to think deeply about their actions and their habits. I want people to make an impact. And that I had this car accident. My son and I were really badly hurt. And it's always been a passion of mine. But since that moment, truly, life or death experiences, they change you forever. And now it's more clear than ever that we're so lucky that we get breath. And if we have legs that work, we're even luckier. And I want people to really live a good life. Myself, I want to continue to grow. I want to challenge my self-doubt, my fear, my insecurity. I want to stop operating from the shitstorm that happened in the past. I want to be super present. I want to love hard. I want to make people laugh. That's me in a nutshell, I think.
That's a pretty solid purpose.
Sounds like a good infographic. That's my spot of the show where I bring that up. Yes.
Yeah. Once a show, Seth comes up with an infographic.
Yeah. I think we've had a couple episodes where people have just, had like a 1, 2, 3 step of, how they approach something. I think most recently the episode we recorded with Alicia and Grace they're both on the Canadian national team for skeleton and bobsled racing. And Grace walked us through how before a race, she does the box breathing method. And sort of the 3 things she does to prepare to go get in her ice missile and go 130 kilometers an hour down, which is crazy. So we just kind of try to take some of those things and package them in a way that will resonate with our listeners and people and in an infographic. So, you sharing your purpose. I think really our goal here is to inspire people. And I feel like if you can't come up with your own version of what you just said, it doesn't have to be anything like what you said, but your own version of your purpose and who you are and why you get up in the morning, it's pretty tough to move forward in a meaningful way. And so if we can package that up in a way that resonates with people and helps them maybe think about something they've never thought of, that's one of the things we want to do.
And it sounds easy, but it's not an easy task to actually come up with that. Like I've sat and thought about it long and hard numerous times about my own purpose. And since Seth and I have been doing this podcast, we've talked about it a number of times, not only our own purposes, but what is the purpose of our podcast? What are we trying to accomplish? And it is not an easy task. So actually sitting down and getting rid of the distractions and thinking about it, I believe is super important, and it really helps center you on where you want to go.
And how beautiful you just articulated the difference between passion and purpose. Purpose is step by step, day by day. Did that work? How did that work? How can we make it better? And that's what you're doing on a sounds like a daily or a bi-weekly basis, that check-in, like, am I aligned? Have I fallen from grace? Are we on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing people have a tendency to forget is that purpose can change. It's okay. You can have your purpose set and you feel like you're headed in one direction. And if you're not headed in that direction and you sit and think about it, it's okay to change that purpose.
Totally. And we're ever evolving, right? Like, JP, are you a parent?
I am. I got sleep last night, but I'm I'm usually a full-fledged parent, not getting sleep.
Yeah. And think about JP, Seth, Erin, pre-children. Think about us in university, high school, and then now, like our dharma, our mission, our purpose, it is always shifting. Our skills are ever shifting. I heard it once, if you don't know your purpose, find out what you're passionate about, find like 6 passions, and then see where they intersect, cross over to try to find something that you can really dig your teeth into.
This has me reflecting a little bit on pre-family Seth and post-family Seth. And it's there's a lot to unpack there. But you also mentioned your car accident, traumatic life experience. And one of the things we want to also do this season in particular is talk about mindset, overcoming challenges, and share with people some real stories in that vein. I know for me, if I think about traumatic life events, my stepdad passed away when he was 38 in a work accident. And the result of that event basically shaped my entire life and developed a lot of, I'm going to say, bad habits, and maybe didn't necessarily surround myself with the best people, and sort of went down this path that led to me waking up. I'm going to say waking up one morning, but that's sort of generalizing it a bit, and looking in the mirror and not even really knowing who I was, what I wanted, severely overweight, on the verge of divorce, we'll call it. And the only goal I ever really had in my life was to be a great dad, and just sort of this awakening that I wasn't doing that, because if you're not taking care of yourself, if you don't care about yourself enough to exercise, take care of your mental health, surround yourself with the right people, follow your purpose, etc., it's pretty hard to lead by example and be a great parent. So, I had this awakening and this realization that I needed to make some changes, and went down that road. And then I'm just wondering, from your perspective, you have this moment where you almost die basically with your child. I can't imagine what goes through your head and as you're going through that. And then on the other side of that, did what isn't important in your life or your purpose, did it change? Did you make a different decision on your life path from that, based on that? Or were there other factors at play at that time?
First of all, I'm so glad you decided to wake up. And yeah, your life could have gone a very different direction. So the accident, did it change me? I mean, my reverence for life, or my gratitude for my ability to be here right now in this body, it became more clear to me that I was very fortunate. There is a shaman that I listen to, and he says there comes a point in everyone's life where they have to fight for their life. And he calls it the predator. He says the predator wants you to play small. The predator wants you to shut down. The predator shows up when you're trying to extend the boundaries of your life. And it says, Seth, you can't, you're not that smart. You're kind of fat. You're nobody likes you. Anyway, so he talks about this reverence for life where you have to fight for it. And I think my accident, I was under the impression that I had to do it all alone, that it was all on me, and that I had to, hustle to make my dreams come true. It was also the moment that I was in like this tumultuous, ridiculous relationship. And it was a big moment where I was like, nah, that's not working anymore. I have to cut those ties. And the angels and people that appeared after the accident, like I couldn't walk my kid to school. I tore my hamstring. I was a single mom. I broke my right arm. I couldn't make him lunch. I had a severe head trauma. He had glass in his head and his face. So I needed people. Like I really couldn't do it on my own. It was like the dead of winter. And so the people that showed up and me asking for help was major. So he said, you won't weight bear again. And I was like, hell no, that is not my reality. I refuse for that to be my reality. Anyway, and so within a couple months, I was weight bearing and mostly full mobility of my arm. So yeah, it's like, excuse my language, but fight for this body because it's the only house you'll ever have. And I refuse to live in a body that doesn't let me do what I love to do.
What was harder, the overcoming your personal traumas and injuries, or supporting your son through his in that event?
Oh my God, the guilt, dad guilt. It's a thing. It's a real live thing. I felt so guilty when they were taking me away from the accident and I was on like a stretcher and I was like cross-eyed. I couldn't see. They had taken Mika away in an ambulance to the children's hospital and the social worker came over and I'm like, oh, of course she's here. She's going to take my kid because I don't deserve to be a mom. Like I hit black ice. I didn't purposely get into an accident. So the mom guilt was tremendous, but they say in, I forget what the book is, The Body Heals. Anyway, there's a book about trauma and it says that a child only carries trauma if the parents behave in a way that teaches them that that is traumatic. So at the hospital, they were very clear. They're like, he needs to go back to school right away. He cracked his skull from his ear to the tip of his head, concussed, stitches on his face, but his body, like they jaws of lifed him out. He had one bruise on his shoulder. So it's crazy. The cop showed up and was like, how many fatalities? And we were relatively okay considering what had happened. But the mom guilt was horrific for a while. But I have to say, like, my ex-husband was such a hero. We both treated it like it wasn't that big of a deal. And, I would cry and I would do my thing alone and with my mom and with my therapist. And then for my son, we would play games and we would laugh. But it's almost bizarre because he said to me shortly after the accident, Mom, we were spinning and flipping and we got a second chance. And then he was, 6 at the time. And then he'd be like, Batman and Robin don't love each other. Like it was just such a fleeting comment that he never said again. But I'm like, oh my God, we did get a second chance. So that honestly dealing with the guilt of hurting my kid was the biggest.
Was it before or after that you went all in on being a yogi, or I guess 50% as you described earlier, but when did that occur?
Interestingly enough, Eckhart Tolle, you probably know him. He calls it the pain body. So I was working in human resources. My parents were like, get a pension and a real job and get a haircut and whatever. So I was working in the real world and I desperately wanted to be a yogi. So I was teaching a couple classes, but I knew to be what I wanted to be, 10,000 hours, whatever, a master. I couldn't be dipping my toe in the water, but I was so worried about what my parents might think that I still tried to juggle it. And then I had a scrambling accident on Mount Norquay here in Banff. And I was sitting there, broken arm, broken front tooth, stitches, another head injury. And I was like, you get one shot. And if you really want to pursue this yoga thing, you got to do it because you could die in that office. And there's nothing wrong with office work, but for me, it is not my call. So that was the moment when I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make way less money. And there's no promise of anything, but it was the ultimate faith in like what I love.
When you look back at that Erin that was making that decision and weighing all the options and, considering what your parents thought or what society might think, or all the things that we've been conditioned to believe that we need to do, i.e. get a job with benefits and pension, et cetera. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And, JP and I have followed that script to a T as well. What advice would you have, being where you are now, if you were to go back and talk to that version of Erin who was going through that process?
Erin, you are such a badass. If anyone can do it, it's you. You are going to stumble and you are going to encounter things that you don't even think you can process or digest, but you got this. And this is written in your bones. Like this is you.
I feel like that's a conversation a lot of people, if they would take the risk, if they would take the step and try, a couple of years from now, they would have a similar conversation with their older self or their younger self, and they would say, I don't know what you were so scared of, that obstacle. Like sure, it was an obstacle, but you're so much bigger and better than that.
And that's, I think, what I mean about 30% like dirty rap music is I love, like, let's say Nicki Minaj, and she's just like, I'm the queen and I make all the money and you all bow down to me. And not that it's like that, but it's this confidence. And it's not about being the best, but it's like, you should try to do what you love. If you love it and you're willing to be purposeful and put the time in and one foot next foot, I'm yet to encounter something that's not possible.
See, this is where we connect, JP. I think on the first podcast we ever did, we talked about people who inspired us. And I mentioned Lil Wayne because, there's a few reasons, but one of the reasons is he gets in the booth and he just freestyles everything. He never writes down a lyric. And not that all of his content or all of his raps are amazing, but like to just get in a booth and one take and come up with the stuff that he comes up with off the top of his head. And, he does a lot of this. Well, him and Nicki Minaj are pretty tight. Like, I don't know. It's inspiring to me, the way that someone could do that. And, when I think about JP and I with this podcast, that's part of what we aim to do. Like we don't spend a lot of time rehearsing and writing scripts and trying to, over manufacture it. We talked about this off the top. Like we're not after perfection. We just want to get in and have some fun, and hopefully people gravitate towards it and enjoy it. But there's so many people that are out there across all industries. And that's part of, what we're trying to show as well. You can find inspiration anywhere. So I love that you brought that up.
And the one thing you kind of touched on is what someone coined FOPO, fear of other people's opinions. And Lil Wayne and Nicki are like, I'm the queen, kiss my ring, I have so much money. Like, they don't care what we think. They're not worried that we're like, they have too much money. Why are they so abundant? Why don't I have that? They're just like, I hope this inspires you.
It's funny how we form opinions on, people who do have money, don't flaunt it, often are giving back in many, many ways. And we are all over them. But the people who are just flaunting that they have money, we're like, yeah, good work.
So true. I wonder what that's all about.
That could be a whole nother episode.
I'm sure that could be a whole other episode.
That's getting excited. He's like, we get to do an episode about rap. Let's do it.
I've been teaching my son, and I don't know, people might not agree with this, but I've been teaching him a solid course in Eminemology, driving back and forth to basketball. And, on the surface, I think a lot of people would think Eminem, like some of his shock rap and like some of the more, there's certainly songs that I'm not showing him, but there's actually some significant depth. And if I think about influence to my life, I listened to every single Eminem song like a million times growing up, and I learned a lot from them. And, you talk about resilience and overcoming challenges and what, I don't know if this is a topic we want to get into, but, you think about parenting. I didn't have a lot of influences on that front. There's a lot of divorce in my family, a lot of dysfunction, a lot of challenges. One of the constants, if I think that I have thought about this, is, Eminem being there for his daughter no matter what, and in my situation, that wasn't the case with my father. And there's certainly things that happened in that realm. And I didn't necessarily have an anchor in terms of fatherly figures and the things that he rapped about and how much he cared about his daughter and how nobody would ever, even if he hated or had the worst relationship with his wife, nothing could take his daughter away from him. And honestly, that was foundational for me in my parenting style. And I don't know how we ended up here, but I just felt like I needed to share that.
No, I think it should be a bumper sticker. Like, I am a great dad because of Eminem. Like, it's an interesting thought, but I hear you.
I need to listen to more Eminem.
There's a lot there. Anyway, I digress.
When I first met Andy Dufresne, I told him, "You've got to get busy living." But my greatest regret is that I never told Andy about Biz Dojo brand coffee. You see, the smooth, rich flavors of the Master's Medium or Dojo Dark roast are what makes freedom taste so good. So get busy living. Get Biz Dojo brand coffee.
Hi there, I'm JD Lewis. I think I still host the morning show from 5 until 10 a.m. on CJ92, unless they fired me, in which case this is all invalid, but you're listening to the Biz Dojo podcast.
So one of the things we're doing this season, Erin, is on the recommendation of my mom, we are incorporating some listener questions. And so most of them have been coming from my mom.
They're not the worst, they're not the best. It's time for questions from Mama Seth.
We have a question here from Mama Seth, and it is, Erin, completely changing your life course is a huge decision. We often struggle to make choices for our own well-being and also balance what's right for our family. Was there ever a time where you had a conflict of choices between yourself and your family, and how did you navigate that?
The one thing that pops up is I run international training. So I take a group of yogis away somewhere in the world, and I'm there for a month, and I'm working 10-hour days to teach them to become teachers. So I'm about to leave for India. My boy is 2 at the time. He comes down with a crazy high fever. We have to take him to the hospital. This is the night before I leave for India. I've got 17 students that have already flown or are flying. So I'm like sitting in the hospital holding this little boy's hand. He's heating up. They're doing all these things. And it was a real question of like, what do you do? I knew that he would be okay, but I also had these 17 people waiting for me across the planet. So I called in my mom and I said, like, what do you think I should do here? I'm in a pickle. And she said, well, you can't stay. He will be okay. And I can fly out. So my mom ended up flying out from Saskatchewan to help my husband at the time. And I left for India, but like, again, mom guilt. And I think it was just like knowing that he would be okay, but sticking to my commitments. And I think as a parent, like, especially JP, you said, oh, I slept tonight. When you're a parent and you have to show up as your best self and you're not well rested, that's really challenging. My practice is at the heart of my life, and my son knows that, everyone knows that. So I arrange my schedule so that I can be on my yoga mat before I have to face the day. And that's a selfish choice, but I know that it makes me a better mom. It makes me a better person. And that is a risk I'm willing to take.
I can't wake up in the morning. I think that's my struggle. I know, like a lot of people we talk to talk about how important the morning is to them. For me, it's the opposite. Which it works out well with my wife, who happens to be more of a morning person. So we have, I'll call it split shifts. Much like Seth and I, we have split shifts for the podcast. My wife and I have split shifts for kid coverage. But I find when I do sleep, even if it's 2 a.m. to 10 a.m. instead of midnight to 8 or 10 to 6 or whatever it happens to be, I am just I'm a totally different person. And I don't feel like I'm necessarily doing anything different. I think I interpret the world differently. I experience the world differently, and then I project that differently.
And all neuroscientists and biohackers, I love endurance sports. All of them say sleep is you could do anything you want, take all the supplements, train as hard as you want. That sleep is the most important.
Another listener question from Margaret. Erin, was listening to one of your podcasts, and you mentioned that listening requires your full attention. But what if you're not particularly interested in what the other person has to say? How do you appear interested and willing to understand and help that person?
So I might ask Margaret why she's not interested. And if this is a hierarchy thing, like we tend to place levels of importance on the person in front of us. Let's say Nicki Minaj was in front of me. I would be like waiting for a pin to drop. And if my mom was in front of me, I might be like, oh God, this again. Okay. I would say, Margaret, teachers are everywhere, and perhaps ask questions that gets you engaged. Find your similarity between that person and what you might learn from their experience. In some cases, it might be, I'm too busy for this. I'm sorry, I've got to go to the grocery store. That might be an exit strategy. but really try to make that person feel like the star of their own show and ask questions that get you excited.
One tip just to build on that I got from my coach was, and I know you just recently did a pod about this, Erin, the difference between listening to respond and actually listening. And one of the tips he gave me, and I've actually found it particularly effective in all of my interactions, is just listen to the words that the person is saying and then ask questions about the thing that you least understand about what they said. I found that particularly helped even with my son. He loves to talk about video games, so he'll talk about Fortnite ad nauseum. And I was kind of at the point where I was like, I don't need, like, when we go on a walk, like, we're only talking about Fortnite for 20 minutes because, like, I can't do an hour straight about Fortnite. But I actually flipped my thinking on that a little bit because I just started asking him questions about the things that I didn't understand. And it honestly led to some of the most interesting conversations him and I have ever had. And it was just a little Jedi mind trick. So I would offer that as another way to sort of immerse yourself, be present, and then just ask about the things that don't make sense to you or that you least understand.
I think the other thing, just so that we have 3 ads here, the other thing for that is important is, when you're having those conversations, it's not just a waste of your time if you're not paying attention and being thoughtful. It's a waste of nobody is benefiting from the conversation, and you're not able to multitask. Humans cannot multitask. You are unitasking really, really quickly when you're switching between things, which is also not good to any of the things that you're switching between. But really consider that, if you're feeling like it's wasting your time, you're also wasting their time. It's okay to stop conversations and say, hey, where are we going with this? What are we going to do with this? What are the next steps? Because I think far too often people just listen for the sake of letting people talk rather than listening to understand and listening to work together with them. Another infographic. Another
infographic. Erin, I feel like I have so many other things I'd love to cover with you, but one of the couple more things here before we end the show. The beginner's mind. I think this is a really interesting concept. I know you talked about it again on one of your podcasts. What is the beginner's mind? And if someone is looking to start something new or venture into the unknown, what advice or guidance would you have for that person?
The beginner's mind is this Buddhist philosophy of an open, eager mind that lacks preconceived notions. So a beginner's mind is beautiful in a beginner. It's even more beautiful in an expert. A beginner sees possibility and an expert knows the answers. A beginner's mind is this idea that we want to cultivate the I don't know, let's see mind, the mystery, the magic of life. And it's a beginner doesn't know the answers. Again, they're not attached to the results. They're there to learn. They stumble. They might get a little bit embarrassed. The cool thing about a beginner, I don't know if you've done anything new in the last little while. I've recently started mountain biking and it's kind of cute. Like I get to see little baby Erin and she's like, oh gosh, like I'm going to hold my brakes and, oh, this is scary. I'll walk. It's kind of sweet. And so the beginner's mind is to be engaged and receptive with what's in front of you. Again, it's more easy when you are a beginner. It's more challenging when you've done something for a while. And when you gentlemen were talking about always checking in with your purpose, your direction, you're doing that. That's the beginner's mind. It's like in Buddhism, they love doubt. They like really want you to question things, but not skepticism. So an expert has skepticism. Like, I don't know if I trust you. You got to prove it to me. Whereas like doubt is like, I'm interested, I'm engaged. I wonder if this fits my MO, my life. Yeah, I think that's all I'd say about the beginner's mind is get excited. You don't know the ending of your story.
It makes me think we were talking to Grace and Alicia on the start of this season about some of the things that we were doing, and actually mountain biking came up for me. There's some nice paths near my house, and it makes me think. I took the path and I went down the path, and then I didn't think about having to come up the path. And I think like for me, that's what beginner's mind is. It's like the excitement, the intrigue, like getting on the bike and just going and doing it. Whereas if I was an expert, I probably would have sat at home and said, I'm not going down that path because I got to come back. I know as an expert in mountain biking, I know that there is a vertical return after a downhill on the way out. So we're not going to do that because it's too much work. So it forced me to experience something different.
What a good point about not really knowing what you're in for.
You mentioned doubt and managing that. And I know I had messaged you a few weeks back, and you had done a pod about the 9, I think it's 9 obstacles. And one of them was managing through self-doubt. And I think everybody goes through it, whether it's career, life, sport, whatever the case might be. And any tips or tricks or how do you manage through those moments when you're having self-doubt?
Yeah. Before I say this, my teacher explains it in a really cool way. So the 9 obstacles come from the Yoga Sutras. And he says that when the demigods, those that didn't make it to out of the world, when they see that you're making progress, they throw down an obstacle to stop you. So it's kind of cool to think of it like that, like, oh, I'm actually making progress because I've hit a roadblock. So we outsource our self-esteem to our work, validation, and self-esteem is sourced from self. Self-confidence translates as to confide in. So to confide in yourself, to know that you've got all the answers. And self-doubt is a feeling of uncertainty, hesitation, just a feeling of, I don't know if I can do this. And I would say the antidotes to it, when I see it in my clients and myself, I look on my past successes. Like, where have I felt this before? Where have I overcome something that I thought I couldn't do? Right now, I'm writing a book and I am encountering every demon that in my closet, every fear, every insecurity, every you are a loser, every voice of a person that didn't like me is coming up. So my big thing is it goes back to that one step at a time. Like, why are you doing this, Erin? Okay, you're going to transform something within you. Don't get attached to the results. I try to find validation from within. What did you do really well today? Like, what are your wins? At the end of the day, I always ask my son, like, what are 3 awesome moments, like top 3 things that happened today? And I do that with myself as well. So I would say self-esteem and self-doubt are kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum. And it's to go back to the why. And if we talk about a meaningful, purposeful life, it's that every day I want it to be outstanding, the best that it can be, knowing there's going to be days I feel sad and low. But again, like, where was I successful? Oh, I had a really healthy breakfast. That's great. I went for a walk. Amazing. So I think it's like accolades to self. Don't compare yourself. The metaphor of the trees, like, and they all bloom, they grow at different times. And the other tree isn't looking at the one with flowers saying like, well, why didn't I get flowers? Why haven't I grown yet? So it's like, we can watch one another and celebrate the success of another, but we're not on the same path and our timings is different.
It's interesting what you said about roadblocks. Like, you can't hit a roadblock if you're not moving. Like, if I think of driving through Canmore and Banff, you can't hit that next set of construction if you're not moving towards it. Like, if you're trying to get to that eventual destination, you're not going to have anything new in your way unless you're moving forward. So that's interesting. But how do you get, like, when you overcome a roadblock and there's another one coming, like, that demigod's going to throw down another wall in your way, how do you get excited about that wall?
Almost like taking a step back. So sometimes in meditation, you're like sitting there, you're like, throw a cord down into the earth and then pan out, go to the upper corner of your room and look at Erin sitting there. Okay, pan out farther, go to the edges of Banff, pan out even farther and go to the edges of the globe. Sometimes I almost detach myself, but I'm still engaged and involved, but it's almost laughable. Like, I can see a little bit of humor in it. And that, honestly, when I'm in that headspace, if I can just like pull back and watch, it's more enjoyable. Like, even if I think about like injury or accident or heartbreak or parents getting older and sicker, you can't control it, but you can control the way that you see it. Like you were saying, your perspective. So I try to cultivate that I don't know, let's see mind, and almost watch like it's happening to someone else. I'm still engaged, but I'm not like, why me? This sucks again.
Yeah, when I was little, I say that, but it probably happened last week too, and I'm no longer that little. But my mom always used to use a quote that I believe was Gandhi, or a paraphrase of Gandhi, which was, there are two types of things in the world: the things you can do something about, and you don't have to worry about those because you can do something about them, and then there's the things you can't do anything about, and you don't have to worry about those because there's nothing you can do about them. So that kind of speaks to that for me as well.
I love that. That's kind of like that. I think they said Nelson Mandela said it, and it's that, or no, sorry, not Nelson Mandela, the Serenity one, the Alcoholic Anonymous quote. Give me the strength to change the things I can, the courage to know the difference, or whatever. Same idea.
Absolutely.
Amazing insights. Love the stories, Erin. What are you doing for personal development right now? What are you working on? What are you feeding your mind with?
So I'm taking this ancient yogic text that has only ever been dissected by scholars, so Sanskrit scholars and really bright minds, and I'm rewriting it to be digestible for the everyday yogi, everyday person. So I'm writing a book, and I work with a coach. I read a lot, my yoga practice. I'm really into endurance sports and just like that pain cave of not wanting to go any further and what makes you want to. Yeah, that's where my intention and heart is these days.
I ran a marathon once. That was a horrible idea. But I wanted to check it off the bucket list. The thing that kept me going was the Calgary Marathon belt buckle. I don't think they give it out anymore, but they used to give the medal used to be a belt buckle. And that was actually what kept me going for far too many hours on the road.
Way to go. How are your knees?
Just horrible. Just everything about it. I think it took me 2 weeks to recover. I gave myself 8 weeks to train. Far too little time. But I was like, hey, bucket list item. It looks like there's one coming up in 2 months. Let's give it a go.
Talk about a beginner's mind. I'm seeing a trend with you.
It's a horrible idea. Yeah, sometimes it's to my detriment, that is for sure.
On that note, Erin, how can people learn more about what you do, and yoga, coaching, etc.? Where can people find out more?
So the best way to get a feel for who I am would likely be the podcast. And I always love new ideas of things people want me to riff about. So it's the Erin Evans podcast. I'm on Instagram at Erin_Evans. And I have a website, Erin Evans Yoga, where you can find my musings, photos, trainings, upcoming events. I also have a YouTube channel that has a ton of yoga videos if you're interested in practicing with me.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate you coming by today, Erin, and look forward to continuing to listen to your podcast and hopefully collaborate more in the future.
That sounds amazing. And I'm so honored because I know it's a big deal when you choose someone to come on. So thank you for believing in me. It means a lot.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. You're amazing. Good luck. That was amazing.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's episode.
If you like what you heard today and you'd like to tap into your inner wisdom, check us out on thebizdojo.com, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook.
Or send us a message for a free discovery session to coaching@thebizdojo.com.
We hope to hear from you soon. See you next week.